So let's start this final session of today. Uh, okay, and which we are doing the human trafficking indicators. Let's do a quick recap as we always do. Human trafficking is recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons. In fact, I was seeing this very interesting news story on one of the French news channel, or was it a German DW, one of these news channels, in which they were talking about how, because of this new US administration coming in and their war on immigrants and this rhetoric on immigrants, how the migration from Central America has kind of stopped or extremely slowed down, and all these migrants are now trapped in Mexico, because the whole process of these people traveling over to the US, there was a process by which they would apply for a visa, a temporary visa. They could go into the US, and how now these migrants are typically stuck in Mexico. So, and the point is, as we have said, migration is a constant feature. The story of human civilization is a story of human migration. Migrations will keep on happening. And yes, and in this story, they were talking about how this migration was a very lucrative thing for the traffickers, because for a simple reason, these migrants would gather in Mexico, where the traffickers would pit them and take them. And this guy was saying, I do not know where they take them. So trafficking is recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt. Smuggling involves illegal facilitation of migrants. And inevitably, whenever the legal channels close, it will lead to illegal channels. And smuggling is one of the channels. Criminals and criminal gangs exploit human desire for improved life. Now, this improved life, I keep repeating, is an actual thing or a perceived thing. They generate profits through exploitation of victims. Migrants, not the only people vulnerable. And as we had seen in MDI 8, because of the change of production schedules, because of the change of production, there is a change in the labor markets. Now with informalization of labor, a lot of people have become vulnerable because of the elimination of social security in jobs. Why there is no welfareism by the government, and all these people now become vulnerable. They get stuck into debt, and then become ready fodder for gangs to traffic. Let's summing up Unit 1 and 2, enactment of several international and national legislations aimed at tracking the problem. Menace of trafficking continues. Increasing prevalence rates is a well acknowledged problem at both global and national levels. And these are basically against the basic fundamental human rights. And again, as I said, now with this, change of production, change of labor markets, more and more people are becoming vulnerable to trafficking. So instead of going down, trafficking seems to be going up. Different types of human trafficking include forced labor, sex trafficking, child trafficking, organ trafficking, and various factors like poverty, lack of education, weak legal system. So these were what we did in Unit 1 and 2. Unit 3 and 6, we looked at a global problem, came into public consciousness in the 21st century. It was the global south, specifically South and Southeast Asia, where the international events came in. Again, because suddenly the global north woke up to the fact that a lot of people from the global south were migrating into the global north. It became a subject of interest. Mobility of people and the aspect of globalization, and a high level of mobility of capital, transnational character of industrial production, which is what we have been talking in MDI 8 and 7, as to how changes in production is changing in labor market, changes in the way jobs are perceived, and how the whole aspect of work has become you know difficult in terms of subsistence. The capitalist system is pushing down wages, putting more and more people into vulnerability. Devaluation of human labor, ability to choose labor from any part of the world, increase mass level migration, also creating a market for female labor, bringing women in the realm of paid labor. So all these things that we look at, nations are looking at cheap labor. Sophia was giving the example of Romania and the construction work, and I was giving you the example of the World Cup in Qatar and the getting of cheap labor from South Asia. Then there are socioeconomic factors which include poverty, economic vulnerability, education, awareness, and all these factors link onto each other. So, job insecurity leads to poverty, economic vulnerability. Money cannot be allocated for education. Then there is lack of employment opportunities due to education, lack of skills. Skills are changing very fast. Then, of course, there is gender discrimination, economic opportunity, norms, and wherever there is this, they devalue women's contribution, they become more vulnerable. Globalized economy, heightened demand for cheap stuff. The demand becomes a very important factor in creating of these global commodity chains, leading to poor conditions of workers in the global south. Uh, a lot of human exploitation happens, which helps flourishes human trafficking. And with populations continue to grow, unequal economic development, people remain disposable. So look at the fact politically and economically, if the US was instead of building those walls and spending money in detention, if they were to take that money and create factories in, let's say, Central America or Mexico or South America, and help those countries improve their law and order position, possibly people may not migrate. Similarly, if the government, various governments in India created employment opportunities in the rural areas, why would people from the rural areas migrate into the urban areas? So somewhere down the line, there is an unequal development of regions which leads to migration. Then, of course, the regional conflicts, not abated with millions displaced, adding to global warming, climate disasters. Human trafficking will only aggravate, and human seems to be a defining problem for the 21st century. So, all these things keep on adding fuel to fire. There is also interplay of multiple factors in terms of individual vulnerability. And if you try and explain trafficking from a historical point of view, you will understand that right from Roman civilization, slaves were taken. The armies which lost their men and the women and children were taken as slaves. Men were killed, and this slavery then came into modern slavery, came into indentured labor, which was also a form of slavery, which is now into trafficking. At an enormous scale worldwide, but only a fraction of victims get identified. There are multiple reasons why identification does not happen. We will talk some of those reasons in this particular PPT. Only 0.4% of the victims were able to be identified. In the 2010 Trafficking in Persons report, only about 40,000 of an estimated 27 million victims of trafficking. And this is 2014. So you could imagine how the problem would have compounded in the last decade. And of course, there are missed opportunities to identify victims. First and foremost, who is going to identify? Each person on the road is not trained or capable of identifying a traffic victim. So we look at various indicators in this presentation. Recruiters initiated a direct contact with 96% of children and 92% of sexual exploitation victims. Forced to, and recruitment could be forced, it could be totally deceptive, it could be partially deceptive. We have seen it in other units. In unit 8, in fact, how victims are identified, how they are entrapped into trafficking, how they are exploited, how they are transported, is to get people who are, and one of the techniques of entrapment is to use people who are already victims to recruit new potential victims. It's almost like a pyramid marketing technique. Then, because a lot of third party recruiters, because of these globalized commodity chains or production networks, there are these third party recruiters who organize labor. Now these become gateways to traffic people, because they operate on a transnational scale and it is very easy for them to move people. So this we read in unit 8. Transportation land routes are the easiest way to meet people across borders, easy across green borders or forested areas. Internet has changed the modus operandi. Today, it provides anonymity, virtuality. You are able to identify victims using internet, using their social media. You are able to even get traffic victims to do stuff or to exploit sitting in their place without moving the victims. In Unit 9, we looked at victim identification. Individuals are identified as by relevant practitioners, can be reactive when the victim self identifies, or is proactive when the practitioner identifies a traffic victim. And there are various practitioners. There could be healthcare workers, there could be child support staff, there could be law enforcement, uh, there could be judicial people. Is a challenging task that most traffic victims are first identified by a local police officer or a member of the community service organization. So, unless these people are trained or they are continuously upgraded in terms of new modus operandi, new ways to identify, more often than not, there will be a missed opportunity. It is important to educate communities about trafficking, including its prevalence, subtypes, warning signals, right of victims, and available resources. So, assuming the fact that if a society is trained, they come across a traffic victim, what are they supposed to do is also a very important part. Because in case you do not know what to do, it will be again a missed opportunity. Community-based or grassroots effort had often been more effective at providing immediate responses. And it is very critical, a role of citizens and social service agencies. So that we did in Unit 9. Uh, Challenges in identification, experience of identification, and structural institution challenges. So, if the experience is bad in terms of, the law enforcement criminalizes or stigmatizes of victims, more often than not, other victims will not come forward. Then, of course, if the traffickers, are threatening, and then there is a structural and institutional challenges in terms of difficult to seek legal resources. They are categorized as criminals and so forth. more often than not, victims will not come forward for identification. So let's look at various indicators which point to an individual in a traffic situation. How these indicators differ in different exploitative situations. Exploitation in a sex situation would be different from exploitation in a forced labor situation. Trafficking is a $150 billion business estimated in 2024. And think of the fact that this is a tax-free business. There is a possibility that part of this money is given as bribes, but this is predominantly tax-free. There are 49.6 million people in modern slavery. And this is estimate, with 35% of them being children. So it's a huge problem. Environment conditions, including tourist destination, large public events, seasonal farm work, online advertisement, truck stops, military bases, factories, international borders, colleges, and universities. Just about everybody is vulnerable besides the migrants. Migrants become more vulnerable, but just about everybody is vulnerable. And as I keep saying, everybody of us is vulnerable at some point or the other. Locating and identifying is much more complex than traditional crimes, primarily due to hidden nature of trafficking. Distinguishing traffic victims from other forms of victimization, particularly spanking. How do you know that the victim, a migrant, is not being smuggled and is being trafficked? So inevitably, it is much complex than it is understood. Usually done through outreach programs of NGOs, SOS hotlines, state agencies. So there has to be multiple, strategies of combating. More personal to this list by including law enforcement, staff of non-government, international organization, embassy personnel, social and health workers, labor. Because think about the fact, a labor inspector goes in a factory, he is the point of contact to see who are the workers out there. And if he is trained, he can identify if some of the workers are trafficked. Transport agencies, religious organizations, citizens, families, or friends of the victims. So, as more and more people become aware, uh, then you are able to possibly red flag and identify victims. Indicators should be understood as flexible instrument. It is not that indicators are perfect. Avoiding indicators can also stereotype and victimized or presumed traffic person. For example, stereotyping is typically you come across a beggar on a traffic light and you stereotype and said this particular person does not want to work. He's a freeloader. So that's stereotyping. And human beings typically stereotype because that is that is the easiest way for human beings to understand complex world. Media stereotypes a lot. Indicators should be considered as basic tools that require assessment and enhancement and serve as guidelines. So, for example, today, social media could typically be guidelines or indicators to events happening. You cannot and you cannot actually know what is happening based out of a media report, because media report will look at one particular angle. Similarly, when you are studying a subject, you have to look at multiple perspectives of a particular thing, because unless you look at a multiple perspective, inevitably biases start coming in. ad hoc, as in the case of many countries today. And inevitably, because there is a complexity, and ad hocism typically can go wrong. And that is why processes become important. So let's look at the trafficking indicators. Can vary depending on type of trafficking. There are some common signs and indicators that suggest someone is a victim of trafficking. Presence of one or more indicators does not necessarily confirm human trafficking, but they should raise suspicion, red flag, and prompt further investigation by trained professionals. So inevitably, training becomes a must, because common people can only do leads or raise red flags, but it's actually the trained professional who is able to identify between a traffic victim and a non-traffic victim. So what are the general indicators? Physical abuse, sign of physical abuse like a bruise, cuts, burns, as a means of control or punishment. Restricted movement, any people who's restricted, limited freedom of movement. So physical abuse, restricted movements. But again, understand the fact a physical movement or restricted movement need not be a traffic person. It could be other reasons. Isolation, isolated from the community, not to interact freely, exhibit signs of fear, anxiety, or depression, exploitative working condition, long hours, little or no pay, lack appropriate safety equipment, forced to work in hazardous condition, live in substandard housing. These are general indicators. So in case you have a question which talks about human trafficking indicators, you can subdivide into general and then specific indicators for sexual abuse, or indicators for forced labor, or indicators for begging. So you can remember 1-2 points. And again, most of this is experiential, so you can typically construct an answer. High-tech industries dependent on local infrastructure created and maintained by low-income, unskilled, and semi-skilled worker, and hence undocumented, untaxed, and unorganized. Domestic work becoming commodified, turned into a commercial product filled with documented and undocumented immigrants. And when worker is trying to subsist or find a means of subsistence, he or she becomes extremely vulnerable to traffickers and exploitation. Control of finances, inability to communicate freely, lack of identification documents. So inevitably, if you ask a person, where do you stay, and the person hesitates, or is not able to understand, or is not able to say where he or she stays, becomes a red flag, because most of us know where we are unless it's a child. Language barriers, threats of violence. So one of the things they said in a traffic situation, that they were signs of a different language. Now, if there are signs in a different language, obviously these people have come from outside. That is the way practitioners were able to find out trafficked people. Substance abuse, psychological trauma, inconsistent stories or scripted responses. So when you question a person, what happened? How did you get injured? And if you get an inconsistent answer, that's an indicator. News story from Northern Ireland about majority of human trafficking victims from three East African countries of Eritrea, Somalia, and Sudan. Can't produce passport or personal documents, unsure of their home address, distrustful of authorities, no access to medical treatment, control of others, overcrowded house or flat with regular turnover of new occupants, or someone who may not have cash. Because if they are controlled by somebody else, obviously they will not have money. So in the unit, there are a couple of case studies like this, which have been given. UNODC breaks these indicators into various categories: general, sexual exploitation, labor, children in traffic situation, domestic servitude, begging, and predicament. So they have split up into different forms of exploitation. Let's quickly go through that. A lot of it will be repetition. Uh, they must work against their will, feel they cannot leave, unable to leave, show sign that their movements are being controlled. Fear or anxiety, worried about violence or threats, show signs of injury, unhealed wound. So these are general indicators. And again, as I said, these are indicators, these are first, and then they will have to be confirmed by trained practitioners. Found in or connected to type of locality likely to be used. Now, again, there are specific areas. Unfamiliar with local language, don't know their home or work address, don't speak for themselves, act as if being instructed by someone else. And how do you know you are acting as being instructed by someone else? You look at somewhere else. So somebody asks you a question, you look at somebody. So indicators for children in exploitative and traffic situation. Look intimidated, no access to. Children typically should be in schools. So if a child is looking intimidated, it's not playing, no access to education, no friends of the same age group, those are red flags. Travel unaccompanied by adults or traveling in groups with persons who are not relatives, those are red flags. Indicators for sexual exploitation: being escorted when they go and return, have tattoos indicating ownership, move from one brothel to next, sleep where they work, live or travel in groups. Language becomes a thing, because if a person has been trafficked from outside, he or she will not know the language. few items of clothing, only know how to say sex related words in local language. So, language becomes an issue because inevitably, if you have been staying in a country for long, you would know the language or you would pick up the language. So, most of these people, have a problem with language because they are exploited, listed for children in sexual exploitation. Evidence of unprotected or violent sex, bruises, advertisements in brothels offering services of a particular ethnicity or nationality, of a, providing services to clientele of a particular ethnicity or nationality, sex worker not smiling. Even not smiling is a sign. So let's look at some indicators for labor exploitation. Live in groups in same place where they work, live in degraded, unsuitable places, not dressed adequately, do not have warm clothing, do not have protective equipment, no labor contracts, no access to earning, work long hours. For example, the Thai fishing industry, because the fishing industry works in high seas, they have a lot of trafficked individuals because for a simple reason there is no law enforcement on high seas. And if a person gets injured or dies, there is no accountability. Thai fishing industry is famous for trafficked individuals. No notices have been posted in language other than the local language. No health safety notices, health and safety equipment. Employer manager is unable to show documents. There is evidence that workers must pay for tools, food, or accommodation, or these costs are deducted from wages. So even if you have a question and you are able to put some points without remembering others, that should be okay. Domestic servitude indicators: live with family but do not eat with the rest of the family, no private space, reported missing by the employer even though they still live in their employer's house, never or rarely leave the house, never leave the house without the employer, subject to insults, abuse, threats, violence. So as I said, we can come across enough stories where middle class, educated households ill treat. So that is an exploitative situation. It could be a traffic situation. Indicators for begging and petty crime: children, elderly person, or disabled migrants who tend to beg in public places. Be children carrying or selling illicit drugs, have physical impairment that appear to be a result of mutilation. Some indicators for begging and petty crime: children of safe nationality or ethnicity who move in large groups, move in groups while traveling in public transport, activities of organized criminal gangs, live and travel with members of the gang. Lack of recognition of traffic victim outside of the sex industry by general public and professional. It's almost like stereotyping an ideal victim. In fact, because there is so much of talk on the sexual exploitation and the sex industry, there is high awareness, and that is the and again, as I spoke in a couple of units earlier, because the focus of the sex exploitation is so much on the women, that men and boys are, kind of, they go invisible, or LGBTQ plus. May not share such defined demographics in personal characteristics, and it, minimizes recognition of other victims. Might prompt non-trafficked women to compete for victim status. So there is always a case where, there is a illegal migrant, or an undocumented, let's not call illegal, undocumented migrant, who might compete for a victim status. As we have come across cases when there is a consensual relationship between two adults, and once caught, there is there is an accusation of rape. So understand the motivations of human beings, and only a trained professional can determine between a trafficked and a non-trafficked person. Develop list of indicators can provide some consistency and transparency in identification, but no list can reflect the complexity and fluencies of traffic phenomena. And in fact, sometimes the lists become, impediment into identification, because you're going by the list. And because human experiences and human beings are complex, and as they say, everybody lies. So you do not know the motivation till the time either you are a trained professional, or you are able to engage further. In fact, they say these instruments actually deepen and strengthen the already prejudiced and stereotypes around trafficking. So lists are not a perfect tool that will improve the procedure of identification of victims. So these are, various perspectives. More often than not, you need some tools to, to red flag, how a traffic victim could be. But at the same time, and that's where the human instinct and experience comes in, because you look at the list, and then you are instinctively and with further questions able to determine whether a person is trafficked a victim or not. And that is why most of the time technology fails, because technology cannot make those creative instinctive decisions. The best of the AI cannot, because AI works on only the data that is fed inside. And if the data that is fed inside is wrong, then the outputs are wrong. Okay, let's sum up. $150 billion industry, estimating about 49.6 million in 2024. And these are estimations. Locating and identifying is much more complex, as we have also seen the fact most resources are available in metropolises and urban centers, A lot of traffic victims typically work in the countryside, in rural areas where resources are less, where means of identification is less, where the access to legal and other resources for the victims is almost negligible. Recognition and identification through outreach program, NGOs, SOS hotlines, state agencies, and that is why these hotlines become a very important tool, because then anybody can call them anonymously. Then there is law enforcement staff, staff of non-government, international organization, embassy personnel, essentially all front-ending government services, and including private services. Other include persons who are not directly involved with anti-traffic, such as transport agencies, religious organizations, citizens. Transport agencies, because transportation will have to happen, they have to take some containers or trucks or trains or somewhere. Some victims are identified by clients and victims themselves. Presence of one or more indicator does not necessarily confirm human trafficking. Raises suspicion and prompt investigation by trained professionals. Common indicators like physical abuse, restricted movements, isolation, exploitative working conditions, control of finances, inability to communicate freely, lack of identification documents, substance abuse, psychological trauma, inconsistent stories. There are some references you can read about. Okay. Any questions?
Sir,
Yes.
sir,
Yes, Dattaru.
sir. Yes, sir. First and foremost, I beg my pardon because I belong to PGDMI. I do not belong to a master's degree, but I belong to postgraduate diploma. But but I find very much. I follow your classes every time you. So I am
Thank
very
you.
sorry, sir. Sir, I have a question to ask you, sir. Now, sir, throughout the session, in this class as well as in earlier classes, you have actually highlighted, elucidated the point that how the state is in cohort with the traffickers and smugglers and whatever and the non-state actors, how they have facilitated this process of trafficking. Sir, I want to refer to Konlan Sharma, Professor Konlan Sharma's one of his seminal work. I think the sir he elucidated that the informal economy, that is the capitalist formal economy, in this stage, they require a informal, well, well-structured informal economy just to sustain and endure it, and just for flourishing the market of the formal economy. This is my point of view, sir. Now, entire, to quote from Maria Mais, this has been an entire housewife of the proletariat and informalization of the labor. You have earlier pointed out in your earlier classes. I followed it, sir, and you elaborated on it. I think entire world economy is experiencing such informalization just to endure and strengthen and consolidate the formal economy. And the state is in cohort. Just in West Bengal, I can give you an example. Just very sorry to say, the state government is just encouraging contractualization, informalization of the employee workforce in full force, so that they are in cohort with the private cooperatives and private partners, and they are encouraging this informalization within the bureaucracy. Even within the bureaucracy, all these have been out. They are outsourcing the software tasks and encouraging the technological work to the contractual workers. So I think is the state is directly playing a role to consolidate the formal structure of formal economy by encouraging the informal economy.
Correct. Devtaru, you are absolutely right. In fact, in the earlier class of today, where
yes, sir, I followed it, sir. Yes, sir, I followed it, sir. Yes.
So, 1 minute, I'll just mute you. So what we have been talking about, in fact, in MDI 8 also we were talking, because of this change of production method. Now you have to also understand the fact that obviously the way the capitalist system runs, it's purely on profits. Informalization allows the capitalists to make more profit, because then they can push the wages down. Remember, the state is comprised of actors, various actors, like the legislature, the judiciary. Uh, why would the bureaucracy be interested in changing the basic structure? Because politicians run out of, in a democracy, the politicians need money to fight elections. That money comes from capitalists, not from the workers. So there is a complicit between the state, between the legislation, between executive, between judiciary, between
Yes, yes, sir.
media,
Yes, yes,
and the
sir. And
capital
they need
and
this money. Yes,
capitalists.
sir. And they need this money. They need the politics. The political establishment needs the
Absolutely,
capital going
absolutely,
forward with the
absolutely, absolutely,
financial oligarchs. They need this.
abs- absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So that is the reason why the even after trafficking was identified as a major criminal activity, there seems to be no control. And now, with whatever is happening in the world economy, with the newest US regime putting Trump's, has completely turned everything on its head. Now we are in a new battle, because, for example, look at the fact that the US has pulled out of WHO. It does not want to recognize anything. And earlier it was the US and the Western nations which were at least forming some rule based system, even though the rule based system was skewed for them and against the other countries. Now there is absolutely, who's going to be looking after human rights? So we are into a new phase, but that's the way the world moves. The idea of us in the class is to look at it from an outside and understand various perspectives. We cannot prescribe, have policy prescriptions. We cannot talk about right and wrong. We are looking as students to understand various
Yes, sir.
perspectives.
Thanks. Yes, sir. Thanks for
And
elaborating on it. Thanks, sir.
okay,
Thanks, sir. Thank you
okay,
very much.
okay. Any other question? Yes, good. Yes, Gurpreet.
So my submission, legal ways of migration versus donkey routes.
What about it?
Yes, sir.
What
Sir,
about it? Good.
a person, for example, 100% they adopted the route for traffickers. They engaged
Huh.
at human traffickers. 50 reached their destination, that may
Huh.
be advanced country any,
Huh.
and 50 remained on the way.
Huh.
So a person is only victim only when he is trapped on the way.
Uh,
Otherwise,
Need not be. Gurpreet, need not be. Need
sir,
not be. Say, for example, the typical case of women which were trafficked from Punjab, from various districts.
sir,
They thought they were going. It was a totally deceptive, movement of this woman. They thought they were going for an employment, and then they were trapped into a sexual exploitative situation in the Gulf.
sir,
So point of the matter is, today, obviously, because as Devtaru was talking about informalization, and now there are these third party recruiters who are recruiting, and migration is one place where people are trying to do better in terms of moving from one place to another. Now criminals can intermingle between the migrants and use migrants for trafficking, but does not mean only migrants get trafficked. You could be sitting in your house, but you are vulnerable. A criminal gang might establish contact and said, I can offer you a job which will get you in dollars. There is an old Hindi saying, "Ke, what will a dying man do? He has to take that water which is offered to him." So, and inevitably, as I said, each one of us are vulnerable in various situations. And if by chance, in that vulnerability situation, we come in contact with a criminal or a criminal gang, then the chances of trafficking is very high because we are vulnerable.
True, sir. True.
And in the absence of and with the state ceding control in terms of regulation, in terms of laws, in terms of other things, inevitably these are state and non-state actors then who dictate. So that is why we are in this particular situation. But this is, and one of the reasons is large amount of informalization which is happening. That large amount of informalization, basically the state has no control.
True, sir. True. Very clear, sir.
Right?
Sir.
Okay.
Sir, just to add, I can add one instance.
Please.
From two particular districts of West Bengal, Murshidabad and Malda, during some religious festival, I don't want to quote it, of the Islamists, the community itself, the specific community itself acts as a facilitator of trafficking of the child, boys and girls to Saudi Arabia, and just for begging, forced begging. And two particular districts of West Bengal.
Correct. Cultural factors are a very important factors. In
very
fact,
important, sir. Very important. And the community is just helping them, helping the traffickers and the third parties, the agencies. And just today, I was following Shubha Singh's book on global diaspora. Just to quote for Gurpreet, this industry it has become an industry as per Shubha Singh for foreign migration in Punjab. There is something, I think, conscious migration in case of Punjab. It is not such trafficking, I think, sir.
No. See, there are two things to it. Punjab, typically, as a case study, what typically happened is there was a green revolution. There were adverse effects of green revolution. And then subsequently, there was this drug trafficking which happened. And then the system started collapsing. When system started collapsing, people found themselves vulnerable and families wanted to send their young children outside lest they got stuck into these drugs and various
stagnation. The stagnation in the economy of Punjab.
So that is vulnerability. Yes. And this culture. Sorry. Bolo.
So that is not trafficking, sir. That this is a conscious decision on the part.
Correct. But in all these conscious decision, there was this case of all these women which were trafficked to the Gulf.
Yes.
So when there is a political turmoil, then a lot of people want to migrate, and then in that migration, criminal gangs are able to traffic people.
Yes, encash on it. Yes, sir. They encash on it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, guys. Then have a good evening. Then have a wonderful week ahead. We meet each other next Saturday for our last classes on MDI 7, 8, and 9. Bye then. Bye, guys.